Okay. Today we're talking about bas b'chalav, and everybody who keeps kosher knows that you need to have a separate. Can't eat milk and meat together. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. And you have to have separate milk and fleishig kelim. That's also pretty obvious. So we don't have cheeseburgers, and we have milk pots and fleishig pots. So today I'm going to talk about some of the simpler parts and a little more complicated parts. Maybe nothing will be new to you. Maybe everything you'll know, but I'll say what I can. Okay. The first is to talk about foods that have to do with bas b'chalav. And what I mean by that is two different things. Excuse me. And one is that there's bread is such a staple, and bread is so simple. It's supposed to be made of flour and water. So Chazal were concerned that if you had if you made bread that was milchigs or fleishigs, that would be so confusing to people. They're so used to it being parv, and they're so used to eating it all the time that they would eat it with the wrong type. So they would put cream cheese onto their fleishig bread, or they'd have corned beef on the milchig bread. So Chazal answered it. We're going to talk about that. It has a whole slew of questions to do with that. We're not going to talk about that today, but that it's related to bas b'chalav. One day we'll talk about that. It's planned for a different day, but there's such a thing. There's an issue to have that. That's not that. It's not be'etzem bas b'chalav. Milchig bread is not really bas b'chalav, but it's sort of an outgrowth of the din of bas b'chalav. You can't have milchig bread or fleishig bread. Okay. Another thing is that if you have, the Ramah says that if you have an imitation of something that's milchigs or fleishigs, then you have to make a hecker that people should realize that it's not really milchigs or fleishigs. So Ramah's case is if you have almond milk, then you have to put, and you're eating fleishig meal, so it looks wrong. It looks like you're eating milchigs together with fleishigs. So therefore, you have to put some almonds onto the table so people will know that this is not real milk. This is almond milk. Okay, so the
cultured meat comes for real.
Yes,
feel with that.
That's true. That's a good idea. That's interesting. Yes, the cultured meat is a good example of that. So in the olden days, people used to
assume we accept it as part of it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was in the news this week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in the olden days, the question is more if it's kosher than if it's parv. But okay, whatever. But
I'm saying, obviously.
Yeah. Okay. So in the olden days, people thought about it. The shiloh was for the first thing that people really talked about was in recent times was non-dairy creamers. You have a fleishig meal and you have coffee at the end of it with this non-dairy creamer. And there was a to-do. You have to put something on the table, put the container on the table, put a label on the table, something like that. And now there are those who think that that was the olden days, but nowadays everybody knows that liquid it didn't come from a cow, and everybody knows about that. And maybe you don't need a hecker anymore. Okay, that's a question whether yes or no. And some people they'll just put onto the card. There's a card on the table at the event that says it's under this Hashgachah, and it'll say and the creamer is parv. Made like that. Okay, but the next stage of that, before we got to I wasn't thinking about your case about the parv, the fake meat, but there's the versions of that, which is what about soy cheese? Or something called seitan. Seitan is made from wheat, from wheat gluten. I believe it is, but it's imitation meat. It's meant to taste like meat. So these things that are fake meat or fake cheese, and you make cheeseburgers out of it. Can you make food out of it? So does that need to have a hecker on it? So it needs a hecker because people who you're selling it as if it's cheese, you're making a sandwich out of it as if it's cheese. So there was a twist. There was a restaurant, that wanted to serve that. And Rebelsky told them that yes, they needed a hecker, but he told them it's enough to put it onto the menu and to put it onto the receipts. That receipts mean for people who don't see the menu, they just get a delivery, so they're never going to see the menu. Just stick onto that it is that. And people said, but not everybody's going to see that. He says, guess what? He says when you put a bunch of almonds on the table, not everybody is so smart to realize, the almonds on the table means that this is almond milk. But the idea is there's some kind of a hecker. Good enough. Okay, so that's what they would do. Actually, we add some.
This is for what again?
For like a cheeseburger. There's another cheeseburger that is made with fake cheese, or the other way, fake meat.
So there's a story to say that you don't need that. You don't need it there.
Because
all we find is Chazal. What's milchig? Milchig is milk from a cow, right? So we find Chazal made exer something that looks like milk from a cow, but cows don't make cheese. Cows don't make cheese.
Where do cheese comes from?
No, cheese. We go ahead. So right. Well, let's say a hot dog. There's now something beyond meat. Would have imitation. What looks like flesh. I don't know if there's a xer on that.
Really?
A hot dog is an invented thing that now if the way what I'm saying, we came up with it in the time of the Torah, there was no hot dogs, there was fleishigs. We created a product that's not naturally a piece of meat. It created a product that people now recognize as fleishigs because everybody knows that a hot dog is fleishig. Let's say they would invent corn dogs and it wouldn't start off being part. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing about this. All we find is something. If you take a piece of meat took a piece of meat that you had something that looks like a real piece of meat.
Seitan, which looks like real meat.
Okay, then I hear, but something that looks like a hot dog, something that looks like cheese.
Okay.
Cheese is not a cheese.
Okay.
I'm not saying I hit the other side too. I'm just saying.
Okay.
I'm just
Very
saying,
interesting. I never thought like that, but okay, no problem. Okay.
Maybe.
Now let's move on like this. Okay, fine. Let's say it. Okay, now when now we move on to like separating between milchiks and fleishiks. Okay, so everybody has separate pots and pans and oven mitts and sponges and silverware and all kinds of things like that. Milchiks, separate milchiks and fleishiks. Just on the side, you can't eat milchiks and fleishiks at the same meal like we had last week. People who know each other are not allowed to eat milchiks and fleishiks. Like last week there was a meeting and some people eating fleishiks and some people eating milchiks. Right, so you're not allowed to do that. People who know each other. Okay, that's a side thing. Okay. It's also really makes life easier if you have a separate sink. You don't have to. There are ways to do it with racks and basins and things like that. But it's easiest, and people who have the luxury of it would like to have two sinks. Okay. Now you don't have to, but a lot of people have parv knives and can openers and peelers, so they could use those for both sides. And for the knife, it's extra beneficial. Because if you're going to cut it, if you peel your carrot with the wrong peeler, if you had a fleshig peel and you peel the carrot, it wouldn't be the end of the world. With a knife, there's rules of avacharif, and things are more serious when you cut an onion with that. So it's an extra bonus to have a power of a knife. This way, when you cut something, you'll be able to use it for milchiks or for fleshigs. Okay, but there's some things that get a little more. So all the things I said, those bunch of things I just said were pretty straightforward. This thing's a little more complicated, and that's like this. There's a din of I'm going to mention a bunch of things that have a very similar concern, and that is the concern of zayah. Okay, zayah means is that if I have something in milchiks or fleshigs that's hot, or treif for that matter, that's hot and giving off steam, then it makes the steam that rises out of that thing has the din of what it came from. So if I'm cooking up a pot of milk, the vapors that come out of there are milchiks. Mamela, if I'm cooking and I have things that I'm putting right into the pot like oil or spices. So then potentially that container could become milchiks or fleshigs, and of course then be ruined for the other one. So in order to become really a problem, it has to be that the zayah, the vapors that come up, are still yad sledis, but when they hit the thing on the top. Okay, so that doesn't always happen. It's not so common. But on the other hand, if you're going to use the same thing all the time, the same oil, the same spices all the time, then you're going to potentially run into problems. It's not going to be every time, of course not. And you could potentially remember to always keep it high up and things like that, but it opens up the idea of potential for problems. So either you could be very careful, or you could have separate ones, like a separate oil for milchiks and for fleshigs, or you could always put things into an intermediary. I mean, you put it into a cup before you put it into the pot. That's your way of being careful. If I take the spices into my hand before I put them into the pot, or I put the oil into a cup before I put it into the thing, so then I'm sort of keeping my other things separate, keeping it powered before I move it into the pot, so it shouldn't get affected by what's going on in the pot.
So is this a halacha? So, in other words, this is a halacha based on just the practical and reality of it. That could be an issue. Mm-hmm. Is there a psak like minigun Ramah or something that you have to follow?
No. It's just you stand in your kitchen. You say, It doesn't say in the Shulchan Aruch that you have to have separate oven mitts either. But you say, I'm going to stick my oven mitts all the time in that.
Right. So my daughter we have a pepper grinder. Mm-hmm. Right, so we designated one as fleshigs for this concern, right. But she put in the thing. She wanted to eat milchiks with it. I said, I think you do because I don't really remember. It's like we only use that often, and I don't really think that we made a fleshig one, but I don't,
Okay, so on the other hand, is there's also from that side is what's going on my computer? I don't know. There's the Ramula side of it also, which is if you're not paying attention to it, you say this is flesh, so we don't anymore pay attention. You might put it right on top of the soup that you're making. You know,
imagine that I did something like fleshig soup that I really
when you're challing, you think it needs some spice, so could you put it? Actually,
I'm telling you, I just was shy. I don't use that often, and it just sounded so rough to me.
Okay, that's a related thing.
No, those feish halacha.
No feish halacha. No. Is a double oven. Okay, and there are people who have instead of an oven, they have instead of a bigger oven, they'll have two ovens, usually one on top of the other, and they want to make one into milchiks and one as fleshigs. Okay, what's really convenient I don't know what people who are not Jewish why they have a double oven. Why do they want a double oven? I don't know, but for Jewish people want to say one should be milchiks, one should be fleshigs, so it's really convenient for them. So you could do it. But you have to make sure that there isn't venting, that the shared vent in between them, because then, again, you have the potential for zayas spreading from one to the other one. We once had, this was not in a home, this was like in an industrial, like in a nursing home type situation, where they had such a thing. It wasn't an oven. It was like an oven, and the Rav Machshir it wasn't under our Hashgachah. The Rav Machshir said, no, there's nothing passes between one and the other. So we said, okay, we turned on one oven and opened up the door of the other oven, and there was steam pouring out. I mean, it was like you couldn't miss it. I mean, it wasn't like there was some deep technical checking over here. The stuff was pouring from one side into the other side. Okay, so in a home oven. What do you say?
Don't see steam in a oven.
Right, in a home oven, it's not as kind. Again, it wasn't a regular oven, whatever the story was over there. But when people call the CRC and we ask them, what should we do? How do I know if I can use my double oven? We tell them first is most people who buy ovens have Shabbos mode to them. You need that for other reasons. And we say to talk to the people who give the Hashgachah because they usually know enough technical to know whether they share a vent. Mm-hmm. If they don't, like we had again a place here that had that kind of an oven. Then you have to look at the drawings or get someone who understands the tech of it to dig into it and figure out, do they share the vent, do they not share a vent, is there potential?
No way to look at it and figure it out.
So sometimes you have to poke around. Sometimes you look at the drawings of it, sometimes you actually test it or play around with it and figure it out. So but we tell people usually that first try is go to the Hashgachah. So the people giving Hashgachah that either know themselves or could find out enough to know that answer that question. Okay. Now related to that, a little step over, which is more common for people, is having they have an oven or microwave or stovetop, these kind of things. So if the oven's got to be one thing. You pick your oven and say, let's say I make it fleishigs, or I make it milchigs. I make an oven one. Let's say most people, if they had only one oven, they would choose to make it fleishigs. So if you want to make something milchigs in it, so you could, if there has to be nothing fleishigs in the oven right now, you have to put something underneath the pan, underneath the milchig pan, like a piece of foil under it, and it has to be covered. Okay, or we tell people to double cover to be extra careful. Okay, so you have to do those things, and then you could put your milchigs into the fleishig oven. You can make your milchig thing in the fleishig oven. Okay, the same thing with a microwave. It should be designated for one. So let's say we make our microwave milchigs, or sometimes you're in a place that you go to a hotel. Okay, so then it's not milchigs, it's just treif. Okay, you don't have a choice of what you want to make the thing. So in order to use it for the other kind, if it's milchigs or in a treif microwave, it's got to be there's nothing underneath the bowl that you're putting into it. You have to put something another. We would tell you to put another separation and cover it also. Cover the thing that you're sticking into the microwave.
How come in a regular oven you have to put something underneath?
It's to prevent if something would spill over or something is stuck under there. If it's clean, I guess it doesn't have to. But if something would spill over, then time would transfer between the grate and the pan also. So you're putting something under there as a way that in case if something drops into there, you didn't just make a way for time to spread from. When we're counting on no time spreading because hana'ah is clearly right. So now what happens? But if I don't have something under there, then I'll get messed up. Well, the bottom of my pan is dirty, so then I'm gonna mess up. So now let's move to a stovetop for a second. In a stovetop, you could use the same if you have a traditional gas stovetop with grates on it. You could use the same grates for milchigs and fleishigs and parav. You can. It's a chumrah to not do it for Pesach, but for year round you're allowed to. But the reason why you're allowed to do that is because two things. One is because what I just said, because hana'ah to clearly because it's dry and no time can transfer. But the other reason is, the Mishnah says, the other reason is because the fire underneath it keeps on kashering it. Okay, so we even if we can't point to a second and say, okay, that's when the kashering happened, but the fire keeps on going, the blue is getting burnt out continuously. So when you have a glass stovetop, there, the first reason, hana'ah is true. The fire burning it out is maybe yes and maybe not. It's questionable. But what's working to our advantage with the glass stovetop is that it's glass and it's only a chumrah and you have to be makbid on blias and glass in the first place. So we tell people that the glass So for glass, the spot underneath the pans where there's fire, that's for sure you could use for both kinds. The space in between is not as clear. I don't remember what the official CRC answer is to that question, but the space in between has no fire underneath it. There's no fire burning out in between.
Why would I put a pot?
What do you say?
You don't put anything to cook there, right?
But you wouldn't put the cook, but you put a pot. Pots move around. When you finish cooking your spaghetti, you might put it into the middle. You don't want to cook it anymore. It's just a place to put things down. The question is that middle spot kosher or treif or what is it?
Yes, that question on the regular oven also, right?
So on that's true. On a regular oven, yes. I'm sorry, I should have been clear. The grates stay kosher. If the grates are used milchigs or fleishigs, then the middle is not. That's true. The middle does not have that status. The most complicated question is for induction stovetop. Okay, an induction stovetop. If you remember, induction stovetop, it's glass on top, the coil that's underneath it never gets hot. It doesn't get hot. It just magically passes electricity into the pot. The pot gets hot, and that makes the glass a little warm because it's a hot pot sitting on top of it. So there's no fire burning underneath it. So the ein blue we have, but the fire burning to make kashering, not. There's no heat at all. At least in electric coils underneath the glass, there's a fire there.
It's not just a pot in the contents to get hot.
Yeah, and that's one of the advantages of the induction stovetop. Is when you take the pot off, you can put your hand on it, and it's not hot at all. Okay, and when you walk away, it's not hot because there's no fire. So using that for milchiks and fleishiks is quite a shiloh. Talk to you about. Okay, now let's move on to kashering back and forth between milchiks and fleishiks. So the Magen Avraham brings a minhag that you're not supposed to kasher between milchiks and fleishiks. Okay, you shouldn't say I have a pot that today is fleishiks and tomorrow I wanted to make it for milchiks and go back and forth. Okay, and there's two reasons for that minhag why you're not allowed to do that. The Magen Avraham says it's because if you just have one pot or one set of silverware and you keep going back and forth, you're going to forget or you're going to make mistakes and you're not going to remember today is it milchiks or is it fleishiks and what am I up to and what happened. So you're going to end up making mistakes. So you should have separate pots or separate silverware, separate everything. And the Marsham says no, that's not the reason. He says the reason is because you, as a rule, when you kasher, it has to be ein binyamin, and if you're going to keep kashering back and forth, you're going to forget whether something is ein binyamin. So it's okay to kasher. In theory, it's okay to kasher it, but if you keep using it back and forth, you're going to remember what did we have yesterday for lunch? Was it 24 hours? Is it not? So you're going to end up making mistakes in that side. Your kashering will get messed up, and therefore you have to have separate pots and silverware. So the nafkamina is between these two reasons. And the Marsham speaks about this, that the nafkaminas are what happens if you have a kli that could be kasher when it's not ein binyamin. Okay, like if you want to go from milchiks or fleishiks to parav, instead of going from milchiks to fleishiks, you want to go from milchiks to parav. Where there ein binyamin is not important to kashering. Or what happens if you're kashering with libun? If you're kashering with libun, then it doesn't have to be ein binyamin to kasher with libun. So. And the Magen Avraham himself has an implication that maybe you could be makel when the kashering is through libun. Maybe the minhag that I said that you can't go between milchiks and fleishiks is only for Hagolah, not for libun itself. Rabbi Schwartz thought that was okay. He thought it was okay to kasher.
And the reasoning of that as well.
For what?
The reason that libun it's okay to go from milchiks to fleishiks.
Well, from the Marsham side, it's because it doesn't have to be ein binyamin. So if the whole chashash is, if the reason why this minhag is because you might forget if you're ein binyamin, there's no problem because for libun you don't have to be ein binyamin. So the minhag doesn't stop you from going from milchiks to fleishiks by libun because there's no what could be wrong.
Okay.
You won't be you don't have to be ein binyamin anyhow. And the Magen Avraham says maybe the minhag doesn't apply to libun. Maybe the minhag was al hagol kind of a minhag, a libun kind of a minhag. Okay. Anyhow,
especially get mixed up where I'm holding it and when totally, don't forget that's still applies, right?
Right. So I'm not sure. I don't remember. I shouldn't say I don't remember what the Magen Avraham says. It could be. Just thinking now is that when you tell people to do Hagolah, they're going to keep going back and forth. If it's a matter of doing libun, that's not going to happen every day. No one's doing libun every day between back and forth. Maybe that's like not such a realistic thing. So once in a while, I'm not sure. And from a different angle, so Rabbi Schwartz thought that was okay to go from milchiks through libun. That was okay. Rabbi Hashgachah said this whole minhag is for people going back and forth. But when something became treif or got messed up, then it was okay. So if I have a par of spoon and it became fleishiks by mistake, that's not the minhag. The minhag, there's no problem with that to go to cash it back to what it was supposed to be. The point is to keep going back and forth. If my fleishik spatula became my mistake, I used it on the wrong side and it got messed up, that was okay to use.
Isn't that like before?
No, I'm sorry. I try to pick a case that was. It's mefurish that it became treif, then you can kasher it. Okay, and that's what there's a famous thing. Wait till Pesach, you kasher it for Pesach, and then you can use it wherever you want. Okay. I'm talking about what happens if it became at a par of a spoon and it became fleishiks. So it didn't become treif. It just became fleishiks. So now you're not kasher from fleishiks back to par or fleishiks to milchiks, then you wouldn't be allowed to. Or if I had a fleishik spatula. I didn't say the word, and it was ein binyamin, and I use it for milchiks. It's not treif; it's just fleishiks and it's milchiks. Okay, so anyhow, so he said, but if it got messed up, then it will be okay. Fine, let's go on. Waiting 6 hours. Okay, so we know the rule that if you eat meat, you have to wait 6 hours. Some people have other kind of minhagim of waiting 1 hour or 3 hours or things like that. But okay, the simple minhag is you wait 6 hours between after you eat fleishiks before you eat milchiks. The other way around, if you eat milchiks, you don't have to wait 6 hours. But there's a couple of there are rules. You can't just go from milchiks to fleishiks, and that is ooh, that's right. Okay, forgot about that. I'm sorry. The first is that you can't eat milchiks and fleishiks at the same meal. So even if you waited 5 hours, if you just ate milchiks, you can't eat fleishiks at the same meal. That's what I forgot to write down. Okay, you can't eat them at the same meal. But assuming you're not at the same meal, meaning you benched already or you finished eating, so then what you have to do is you have to eat something parav and drink something parav and check or wash your hands to make sure there's nothing milchiks on them.
You do those things of checking everything. You can't eat in the same meal.
Right. That's correct. Yeah, because that's the ikra din. That's the ikra din is that the Gemara says you're not eating milchiks fleishiks at the same meal. So the some hold that means you have to wait 6 hours. You have to wait the time between breakfast and lunch is 6 hours. So that's how much you have to wait. And the Rama holds no. It just means is you can't eat it literally at the same meal. And then it's machmer, maybe an hour. It should be machmer, just a chumrah and a chumrah 6 hours.
That's true. That's correct.
Okay, we'll go look it up again.
The moment the minhag stay alechem, you have milchiks and fleishiks. Does it bring another bread because you have milchiks and fleishiks in the same meal?
Exactly. So it should be a separate meal.
No, I gotta wash it again. Just bring another loaf of bread.
Okay, we'll look at it again. Okay, that's my impression. Okay, you can disagree. I think it's just exactly that's exactly what you have to do. Okay, one related to this thing about waiting 6 hours is there's there's a fair amount of chewable medicines that are made with lactose, which is milchiks, and so sometimes lactose is only milchiks. I'm going to tell you about that in a second. But also lactose, if it's medicinal, depending on the need, the medical need for the person, could be the person will be told after they eat fleishiks they can take this medicine even after just waiting 1 hour, which is the ikra din according to the Rama, or the ikra chumrah according to the Rama. Okay, that's a shayla to Okay, now if I cook today's Friday, so I make cholent and I eat a potato out of that cholent. Meaning I ate it was cooked with meat. I'm sorry, cholent that's fleishiks. I have a fleishik cholent, and I eat something out of that pot. But I didn't eat any of the meat. I just ate the potato. So the Mechaber says you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait, but the Ramah says you do. So I just ate the potato. I only ate the things that are parav. But since it was cooked together with the meat, you have to wait 6 hours. And the Ramah says not only if it was cooked with meat itself in the thing, but if it was grease, like animal fat, it was cooked with animal fat, then I also have to wait 6 hours. It wasn't meat per se, but that's the same thing. I have to wait for animal fat, and Practicum say chicken fat, the same thing. Also, even though it's Rabbanan, I have to wait. Also, I have to wait 6 hours. Okay, so the Rama said, but what happens if I just cooked it in a fleishik pot, but there was no meat inside of it, it was just a fleishik pot, then I don't have to wait 6 hours. And the Shach says, and that's even if the pot was dirty. Even if the pot was dirty, meaning even if the pot was dirty to the point that the amount of meat that was left would not be bought b'shishim, that's not a problem. You know, that doesn't the person doesn't have to wait 6 hours. Okay. So some applications of this, of what I just said was, the first is when we have foods that are DE. Okay, the mark that's just dairy equipment. Okay, like CRC does that. Other Hashgachah do also. Which means to say is this food is made with all power ingredients, but it's made on kalim that we use for milchiks. Okay, the kalim that we use for milk, and they were not kosher. They might not even have been clean. Okay,
it's commodities.
It's what?
I can't think of a case where they will not be clean.
Right, but I'm saying that lafuke milivin shel tzedukim. I'm sorry, from some people who worry about, they say no, but even if it was not clean, I know it's usually, but even if it was not clean, that's okay. There's no problem because the Shach says in the case of the fleishiks, he says if you eat in a fleishik pot, and even if it's dirty, and to the point that it would not be batum.
Okay, I mean, where in case of not batum is like Torah on it, it's like. They might limit it. It's like a shitload of Torah. Exactly, because it was a question like, why would that be true, right? Like,
okay.
It was a question of like, I've seen different shitload of Torah.
Right, exactly, Torah. But if everyone who reads the Shach thinks that he means, most people who read the Shach think that he means that it doesn't make difference if it's not Paul. Okay.
Not gonna be. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right? I mean,
okay.
It doesn't make sense.
Put on the side. Okay. But anyhow, so when it's DE, we say you can eat that right.
But anyway, in the case of DE, it's gonna be Paul.
Of course.
Of
course. So you can't eat it together with fleishik. If you eat something, made something in a fleishik pot, you can't eat it with milk. I forgot to say that part. The Rambam says don't eat it with milk, but you can eat it right after. It's not doesn't make you fleishik. You don't wait 6 hours, and the opposite direction also. Okay, but what about when you make French fries from a fleishik restaurant? So there, the people take the approach that people take is they say is if the fryer is not just for French fries, most of the day you're putting into meat and chicken into that same fryer, and that they think that's the case, like what the Ramah said, that there's grease in the thing, so it's like as if these French fries, this potato, was cooked in the grease of meat, and therefore you should wait 6 hours. Okay, so that's why they'll tell you, if you call the CRC, they'll tell you if you go to the Fleischer restaurant and you eat French fries from there, you have to wait 6 hours, even though you only eat the potatoes, because they say this French fry is like the potato from your child. It was cooked not with meat per se. Maybe there was no meat when they did the French fries. There was not meat in there, but there was meat grease in the thing, and therefore you have to wait. Now, Craig says like this: what happens if you cut an onion with a Fleischer knife? So there's all kinds of things about double charav, and the knife is fleishigs. Okay, don't eat it with milk. That's fine, but you don't have to wait 6 hours for that because it's sort of like it was cooked in a fleishig pot. Okay, the double charav makes like it was cooked in the pot, but we already said if it's cooked in a fleishig pot, you don't have to wait 6 hours. Okay, so you don't have to wait 6 hours after eating that onion. Okay, and there's now a shaila, but the minig, the assumption is, most people assume is, what about the other direction? If you cut an onion with a milchig knife, then most assume that you can eat it after fleishigs also. Of course not with fleishigs. You eat it right after fleishigs. You don't have to wait 6 hours. That Rukriga doesn't say. But that's assumed that you could, most assume that you could be makel and eat it right after fleishigs also. You don't have to wait 6 hours before you eat that onion.
I think Rukriga says not that. So you're fleishigs. You're totally fleishigs.
Right.
And you want to eat something cut with a milk knife.
Right.
Somebody says not like that.
Yes.
Somebody's Mechal too.
Yes. There's a to do bad. Yes, there's a to do bad. Yeah. Okay. But it's assumed that you're allowed to be made. Okay.
So you like me makel?
Yes, that you can't eat it.
Okay. I assume you got me on that.
Okay, so I'll tell you the names afterwards. I don't remember the names of it. What did you say?
You have a lot to look up over here.
Yes, I'll tell you the names afterwards. I have today's a different version, so I don't have the names in front of me. Okay. Now I told you that after you eat milchigs, you don't have to wait 6 hours. One exception to that rule is, or the most famous exception is, if you ate certain kind of hard cheeses, then you have to wait 6 hours. The Shach says hard cheese means that cheese is aged for 6 hours, and our most common example of that is. What did you say?
Aged for 6 months.
Did I say 6 hours? Okay, I'm sorry. 6 months. Sorry. So then you have to wait 6 hours, and the common case we have that is Parmesan cheese. That's the most common case. It's aged by law. If to call Parmesan, it has to have been aged for 10 months. There are some other ones like that also, but that's the most common one. There's Siagos, some other kinds of cheeses like that. What did you say?
You have a whole list.
Yeah, we have a whole list. But the most common one that most people on the street are going to bang into is going to be Parmesan. And most people, if that means is real aging, it doesn't mean that it sat in a package for 6 months, because when something sits in a package, it doesn't, so to speak, age. It doesn't come hard and brittle like you're supposed to have for hard cheeses. But okay, but 6 months, if it aged for 6 months for real, then it becomes this very hard and very brittle and very strong, pungent taste, and therefore we have to wait 6 hours. Okay, so now there's a question in the poskim about what happens if I took this cheese, let's say I took the Parmesan, and then I blended it into other things, or I cooked it into other things. Okay, which is again a common way people have. Most people are not eating Parmesan cheese, just biting it off the block. You know what I mean? So if it comes up for Caesar salad, which is salad that has grated Parmesan mixed into it, or eggplant Parmesan, which has Parmesan cheese melted into eggplant and all kinds of other stuff. So most people are makel about when it's melted, like the eggplant Parmesan, and most people are machmir for the case when it's just blended in, where it's not melted at all, just ground into it. Again, there are sheetas all over the place on these two things, but that's how most people do it.
Melting is enough.
Melting is enough that it's no longer this hard, strong taste that leaves you in your mouth. That's how most people assume. It's a seriously position. And most people assume like that if it's melted, it's okay. But if it's ground and just made Caesar salad, there are pizza shops that they have a shaker on the table, you just shake it into your food. Okay, so then just shake it into your food, and you have to wait 6 hours. Okay, and it comes up actually, aside from like pizza shops, where literally people eating pizza, and then they go home an hour later, they want to eat fleishig. They don't, so we have to tell them that it is. But it also comes up sometimes at hotels where they serve you all your meals. So they serve you for breakfast, that they'll serve you, or for lunch they serve you this stuff with the Parmesan in it, and then 4 hours later the next meal is fleishigs. So part of planning the hotel is to make sure, the Hashgachah has to make sure we don't serve Parmesan that's going to make you 6 hours fleishigs, because people show up the next meal, they don't know. What do they know? They serve me food, I'm going to eat it. So okay. Now our last thing to talk about is using basar b'chol for non-food use. Okay, and that's our favorite, of course, is pet food. Our most common use is pet food, because pets don't have to keep kosher. So pets can eat treif, no problem. They can eat treif. But there are some things that we can't give to the pets because they're asur b'hana'ah. I can't have hana'ah from this food, and since I give it to my pet, then I'm having hana'ah from it. So there's three common cases. There are other cases, Rabelsky's, he'd say, I forgot all of them. There was a pinion petach hamor, and he had a whole bunch of cases of like people that are also b'hana, okay, that you're not going to have. But the cases that we have that are also b'hana are basa b'chal. We're going to talk about that in a second. What basa b'chal cases are: chametz on Pesach, or even on erev Pesach after a certain time, and stam yain, wine or grape juice.
You're not giving the pets.
What did you say?
Yeah, you're not giving the pets.
No, they could give grape juice. Could you give grape?
Pets?
Or as part of an ingredient in a food, I don't know. Okay, but that's another thing that's also about no. I don't know if you're right. I don't know which pets each that whatever. Okay, that's another type of thing, and even that's a child. Whether it's also about no, we'll assume that's also about no. Okay, so basa b'chol, which is what today's we're talking about, which is our main thing, is some of the rules to make something usher bahana as basa b'chol mean that you can't give it to your pet. Is first of all, it only applies to kosher animals. So for us, that means beef, lamb, and goat meat. Okay, it has to be from a kosher animal. They don't have to be shefted, but it has to come from a kosher, should I say kosher species, should I say that? It doesn't apply to poultry, like chicken and turkey, or to non-kosher species like pork. Okay, so it could be basa b'chol that you're not allowed to eat it, but to be asa b'hana, it has to have from a kosher min and a kosher min behema. Okay. Also it applies to most things that are milchigs like whey and milk and casein and milk powder, but not to lactose, because as I said in passing before, and lactose is awesome d'Rabbanan, and it's only milchigs with Rabbanan. So milchigs with Rabbanan does not make basa b'chol the rice, so that would be awesome b'hana. So lactose is not in this for this shiloh basa of Isser Hana is not included. And the last thing is that it only applies when the basar and the chol were cooked together. If they're just mixed together, like if you take meat and you pour milk on top of it, it's not going to be basa b'chol that's asa b'hana. It's also basa b'chol, but it's not basa b'chol that's asa b'hana. So you could give it to your pet. So in theory, if you knew how they made the pet food and you knew that they didn't cook the meat and milk together, they just blend them together, that would be okay for your pet. Usually you don't know, okay, but if you would know, then that would be okay also. Okay, so people who have pets have to pay attention to make sure they don't serve basa b'chol, and on Pesach they don't serve them chametz. Okay, so we have the honored task of helping people do that by giving, so to speak, Hashgachah to a company that about their pet food to say which food you could eat, or if not, we try to help people stop. Pesach time is when most people think about it, but really they need to think about it all year. Is which foods have these problems or don't have basa b'chol kind of issues or chametz issues in the basa. Okay, and the last part of hana'ah, the other ways to be over on Isser hana'ah, like and the example came up was of a person if you wanted to give someone gave you a cheeseburger, okay, now you want to hand it to a non-Jewish coworker. So you're giving them the basa b'chol. If you give them basa b'chol, you're having hana'ah because they'll feel appreciation to you that you gave them this thing, or a bottle of wine. Okay, I get a bottle of wine, I have a chafe bottle of wine, and I give it to the next guy. So then I'm having hana'ah from the thing that was basa b'chol, or those other isur hana'ah that I wouldn't be allowed to do.